Hello ladies and gentlemen, Hobo here, and today I'm going to be showcasing an updated video to my Petrify build. I showcased it to you guys a long time ago, but there has been a lot of changes in both Diablo and the build itself since then. First things first, I'm going to start off by going through a rift, and I'll show you the actual gameplay of the build. I also need to change this to Face of Death. Here we go. Basically, the build is a hybrid build. It focuses on crowd control and D.P.S. It's a really good support build, and its true strength lies in locking down enemies for team play and for solo play. Essentially, I can just sit here and chat with you guys directly with the camera and just completely look away from the game itself. All I need to do is run into a group, start horrifying, drop my fetishes, and just let them do their work. The one thing you will need to worry about with this build is the elite affixes that are circled around close range. For example, Molten. Both the liquid form when they move around and the explosion are something you need to keep an eye out for. Electricity is another one. Even though they nerf the proc rate on electricity, it's still something you need to be cautious about. Especially if the elite has fear or knockback, because those can both screw up your lockdown and pretty much release things from your net. Another thing is the arcane sentries. If one of the enemies gets it on you and you're forced to move, you can lose control of the net. Pretty much any affix that affects an area and pretty much prevents you from standing still is something you need to be cautious of. Another thing you need to worry about is enemies who have range attacks outside of your net. They'll be able to hit you and either force you to move or force you to take the damage. One thing you can do to help alleviate that issue is just by activating your Spirit Walk every now and again. It'll help you dodge some of the damage, especially in case of Molten. You can just Spirit Walk through most of the Molten explosions. So as you can see, I'm just running from group to group, throwing down my Horrify, throwing down my fetishes, throwing down my Big Bad Voodoo, and moving on. And that's essentially all I really need to do. I'm not much to fear in this with this build at all. Okay, let's keep going. In terms of team play, it synergizes well with a lot of builds. The only ones it doesn't are ones that focus on pulling enemies or knocking them back. An example would be a Cyclone Monk, because they can pull in enemies that can cause issues, such as the previous listed ones, or Fire Chains. Fire Chains is something you need to be very careful about when you have teammates who pull or push. Because the only problem with this build is it's more or less a glass cannon. It revolves around having Horrify being the crowd control while your pets do the damage. You yourself are pretty squishy. And essentially, I'm just going to run group to group with my Spirit Walk and see if I can get a jump on them before they can throw out any of their affixes. There we go. If I had teammates, I would make sure to try to stay ahead of them as much as possible. I would always run ahead of the group and just Spirit Walk into elites as much as I can. I would also tell them to try and pull anything that is irritating them into my net, which is the AoE of the Horrify, which is pretty big, as you can see. I run the pure area of effect on it for several reasons. One, it lets me control more enemies, and two, suicidal enemies such as Grotesques, if they walk into the net, you'll be just outside of their death explosion. So it's one less thing you need to worry about. Helmet. Now, since I last showcased it, I've gotten several items that help significantly boost the DPS part of this build. Two of which are Better Tasker and Theos. They actually had crit chance and crit, and I rolled crit damage on them. The other one would be the Star Metal Kukuri, which has basically turned this build from support and damage hybrid into pure support and DPS. I am able to do both efficiently. Whilst before I had to be very cautious of when I was going to drop my Voodoo. I usually had to save it for in between every other elite fight. Now I can just drop it down on groups of whites, and I can just drop down multiple, because every time my fetish hits an enemy, it'll cool it down by 1 second. This also lets me throw down a Voodoo on teammates who are utilizing any gems that give them a bonus for being further away from the target. Because essentially I can drop one down for my fetishes and move back and drop one down on a teammate. I can have a large area of effect of Voodoo because of the star metal. Alright, let's move on to the next floor. Doesn't seem to be anything else on this one. Also, since the last video, they've introduced legendary gems, which have significantly boosted the capabilities for both survivability and damage for every build. And I will be showcasing the ones that I run after I do this this rift. I'll talk more in depth about the gear, the pros and cons of what I'm using, and some alternatives that I swap out every now and again. See, this enemy type I have to be cautious of, because I just need to keep an eye out for the electricity and the molten explosions. Alternatively, I can just, you know, go into Spirit Walk and not care about a few of the explosions. If it's a pack that I have completely surrounding me, and they're all over the place, I'll generally just use my Spirit Walk. Reflect damage is probably the biggest killer for this build, and that's because of one of the legendary gems, which is the Pain Enhancer. The reason being is Horrify procs the effect of Pain Enhancer. I don't know if it's intentional or not. The only problem is when it procs it, you take damage. And when you're running into a pack that just has so much of it, it'll kill you very quickly, especially in a Greater Rift. Alright, cases like this, I'm going to switch to my Jerem and just go for pure D.P.S. against this guy. And there we go. Let's hit this thing before we leave. Get one more elite, and I'll showcase what I have. Alright, there we go. Back down. As you can see, the build does a decent amount of damage. Especially when I actually throw in Jerem. That'll give me damage upwards of 60 mil. I've seen it go as high as 100 mil when I'm in group play with all the debuffs and buffs. It can get pretty insane when I have the Jerem. Without it, I can probably hit 50, maybe 60 in a group play with all the debuffs and buffs. Okay, onto the gear. Basically, I'm running as much elite damage as I can get. That way I can do as much damage and provide both DPS and support. Generally, the build itself only really needs the Tiklandian. This is the core component of the build. Essentially, it turns Horrify from a single 1 second proc into a full duration for 8 seconds. Combine that with some cooldown, and you'll be able to recast it and just lock things in place constantly. Let's see. The Mojo I've been swapping out all the time. I've been trying to find a Homunculus so I can have some spare dogs who can help pull some aggro off of me. Another reason why I want one is because of one of the passives I'm running, which is Fierce Loyalty. This will give me a movement speed bonus when I'm outside of combat. This is very handy in areas when I don't want to throw out my fetishes too early, or they all die off because of Sycophant's time runs out. Because with the dogs, I'll have them up all the time, and in turn, I will always have this bonus movement speed whenever I'm not in combat. And it kind of comes in real handy when I'm in a Greater Rift and I manage to die and have to respawn back. The Star Metal, albeit the rarest ceremonial knife, is probably one of the best you can have for this build. Because of the ability to spam Big Bad Voodoo all the time. Not only that, but I'm able to spam my Fetish Army all the time, which pretty much lets me not need to use Zunamasas anymore. That freed up this build to have the All Guilds and Blackthorns, which give me 25 elite damage. As I said before, I'm trying to stack as much as I can so I can have a good amount of DPS with this build. Taskers are going to be your best in slot glove for this build. The attack speed you're going to get with your pets just synergizes too well with Star Metal. Belt is interchangeable. I'm running the Witching Hour for bonus to crit damage. However, I need to find one way better than this. I'd much rather have main stat vitality and percent life. I am a little too squishy. I don't like how squishy I am, especially when it comes to greater rifts, because it just hurts way too much, and sometimes things will snipe you from across the map with just random shit, including just basic white enemies with an arrow or a spear. It's something I need to get a little bit more toughness on. The Blackthorns for the bonus to elite damage, like I said prior. The bonus vitality is a nice little thing, but it's minute. All guilds for elite damage bonus and the elite damage reduction. I'm running a cameo because it rolled so good. I've been using this thing for months ever since I got it. I've tried several different kinds of amulets, and the immunity just comes in way too handy, especially against jail sniping. It's one thing I don't need to worry about anymore. They'll just heal me. Being encompassed in that one area for X amount of time can get you killed, but the free heal it grants on me is something useful. The rings I have are Stone of Jordan. Preferably, I want to find one with crit damage so I can roll off main stat for either the socket or crit damage. Basically, I don't want main stat on this at all. I want to get crit damage in the socket and just have it as high as I can. The other ring I'm running is a Unity for even more elite damage. My friend found this in one of the risks we were doing. I rolled off the main stat for the crit damage. So both my rings are not going to have main stat once I find good versions of them. Now, the gear that I change up every now and again in general play is I'll switch to my Mask of Jerem whenever I'm running into something that I can't fear or root. There are only 2 Rift Gardens I can think of offhand that I can actually root. They are Perende and... what is the other one? I think I can root Sactress, but I'm not sure. But basically, if I can't use at least one of the effects on the Tiklandian, either the Fear or the Root, I'll switch to the Jerem and just go for sheer DPS. I also bring around Nemesis Bracers to get a free Elite Pack every time I hit up a pylon or a shrine. And I also bring around the Warzekine for both when I'm speed farming bounties or if we run into a conduit. Now, one thing that this build also does very well is speed farming, because the amount of movement speed bonuses it can get. You combine the Tiklandian with Rochelle's Ring of Larceny. You switch out your rune to be Stalker, and you also throw on the Warzekine. This gives you the ability to have a large movement speed bonus whenever you're running around. Because basically, you fear an enemy, which will proc the 20%, which then will also proc Rochelle. You destroy something, and you'll have even more movement speed. I'll showcase how quickly this thing can do bounties. More or less, I'll just quickly show you how quickly it can get around. Let's go here. The Desolate Sands is a very large area, so basically you run around, fear an enemy, get the movement speed bonus. You also combine it with Spirit Walk for even more bonus. Just destroy some stuff, just keep fearing enemies. You can also combine this with some more of the legendary gems to help boost movement speed. The only problem is you're going to compromise the damage, so I try to find a decent balance between the damage and the speed. What I have right now is more than enough to get across the area pretty quickly. I will probably use the Krem's buff belt when it drops from the Season 1 into the loot pool, instead of using the Witching Hour. Alright, let's go back to my old gear. Now I'm going to talk about the legendary gems that I use with this build. First up is the Pain Enhancer. This is probably one of the best you can have with a physical pet build. Because whenever your pets deal the critical, they in turn apply the bleed effect. And the bleed effect is pretty significant when you see it. It does several million, especially when you start leveling it up more and more and more. Another reason why it's so good is the second unique effect, which is the Blood Frenzy, which gives you increased attack speed for every bleeding enemy within the 20 yards. That is going to be in a large radius of anything you're horrifying. And I will showcase just how much in Halls of Agony has a decent amount of enemies. So basically, my attack speed is 1.7. Let's find a decent group of enemies. Here we go. Some of the fetishes. 2 point. Basically, they're dying so quickly, but you can see how it went from like 2.3 and slowly decreased as I killed things. The more things you have surrounding, and the more your fetishes proc the effect, the faster your attack speed is. Combine that with Rain of Toads, and combine that with your fetish sycophants, they will just synergize exceptionally well. Your fetishes will proc it, you'll get more attack speed, which gives you more Rains of Toad procs, which gives you more sycophants, and the cycle just continues. You'll be able to get your max fetishes with exceptionally quickly with it. Another thing I want to point out is, like I said earlier, that the Horrify itself will proc the unique effect for the Pain Enhancer. And once my fetishes die, I'll showcase that. Alright. As you can see, they're taking the damage, and I'm not even touching them. That's Pain Enhancer itself ticking for that 8 some odd million. This is why you need to be very, very careful of things with damage reflect. Let's get rid of this guy. Yep. Another one that I'm running is the Enforcer, which is going to increase your pet damage and their survivability. The survivability is pretty noticeable, especially in Greater Rifts, especially after they gave the pets a bonus to toughness based upon your values. Prior, my pets would die at Greater Rift 30 solo. They would be instantly gibbed really easily, including the fetishes who have the fetish army who have force armor, which pretty much helps prevent them from getting one hit. But most of the time, these guys rarely ever die, unless I'm very deep into a Greater Rift. And lastly, the final one I use is Bane of the Trapped. It'll proc off the Horrify, and it'll also proc off of my Piranhas. I've played around with the Piranhas several times, and I decided that I'm going to stick with Frozen because of the chilling effect that it has. And that's because most of the time, my Horrify won't work against Rift Guardians. However, I can slow them, generally, with the Piranhas, which in turn will proc my Bane of the Trapped. I could just stand close to them to use the natural slowing it has, but generally, I try to play it safe. I'll let my fetishes do all the damage, and I'll stay back and just throw out a Piranha every now and again for the debuff on both the Piranha itself and Bane of the Trapped. And it'll basically let me stay safe while the fetishes do all the work. And yeah, that is my Petrify build. It has come a long way since the last video, and it will continue to change as the Diablo goes forward, especially when they start releasing the ancient legendaries. I'm going to have a lot of fun playing around with that stuff, because it'll give me the freedom to have more vitality in my build, and in turn, more survivability. Especially for, like, the basic stuff that I don't need to worry about unique effects for. I can just re-roll it and try as much as I can. So yeah, thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'll probably have another video out sooner or later. I'll probably showcase the build doing a few greater rifts if I can manage to pull out an equal one to the tier I have, which is probably 36, I believe, is the one I stopped off on. I need to get some good RNG for anything deeper. Probably a few more gear pieces too. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day, great night. We're out, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, feel free to follow me on YouTube and my Twitter. I stream every now and again. It's pretty regularly. I'm working on a schedule. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see y'all again next time, and be safe out there, ladies and gentlemen. Hobo out.